My name is Clara, and I'm 32 years old. This past Christmas, my family gathered around the dinner table, and my father, with a hearty laugh that echoed off the polished wood, called the dress I had poured my soul into a sad, beige sack. My mother and sister joined in, their critiques like little paper cuts on a wound I didn't even know was open. 3 hours later, sitting in that same living room, they watched in stunned silence as a famous television host presented me to the nation as a finalist for the American Fashion Vanguard Award, the most prestigious prize for emerging designers in the country. I was wearing that same sad, beige sack. Their sudden change of heart was as predictable as the setting sun, but what they didn't know was the secret I was holding. A secret that would ensure this Christmas would be the last time they ever underestimated me. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Before I tell you about the night that changed everything, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real stories about finding your voice when the people closest to you refuse to listen. To understand that night, you have to understand the 15 years that came before it. My life, until that moment, had been a quiet exercise in managing expectations, mostly the expectations of my family. I worked as a head seamstress at a high-end dry cleaner in downtown Chicago. It wasn't glamorous. My days were spent under the glare of fluorescent lights, the air thick with the scent of chemical solvents and hot steam. I'd fix torn seams on $1,000 suits, replace impossible-to-find buttons on designer coats, and perform minor miracles on garments that clients thought were ruined forever. I was good at it, meticulous and fast, but every stitch I sewed into someone else's clothes felt like a stitch I wasn't putting into my own dreams. My real life began after I clocked out. I'd go home to my tiny studio apartment, a space so small that my cutting table doubled as my dining table. There, surrounded by bolts of fabric, sketches pinned to every available wall space, and my grandmother's old Singer sewing machine, I would design. I would create. Fashion wasn't just a hobby for me. It was the language I used to make sense of the world. It was the only place where I felt truly myself, where I was in control. That control was something I desperately lacked in my family dynamic. My father, Mark, had been a construction foreman until a back injury forced him into early retirement 5 years ago. He claimed the pain was chronic, debilitating, leaving him unable to work. My mother, Susan, had never worked outside the home and took on the role of his long-suffering caregiver with dramatic flair, sighing heavily whenever she had to fetch him his pain medication. And then there was my younger sister, Jenna. 4 years my junior. Jenna was the golden child, the star around which our family galaxy revolved. She was beautiful, charismatic, and had decided her career path was to become a lifestyle influencer, a vague ambition that mostly involved taking artfully curated photos of herself and requiring a constant infusion of cash for new clothes, tech gadgets, and brunches. I was the reliable one, the boring, practical, responsible Clara. The family's walking, talking safety net. After my dad's retirement, his disability checks weren't enough to cover their mortgage and lifestyle, so I stepped in. I sent them a third of my paycheck every month, without fail. That money wasn't just for bills. It was for Jenna's business expenses, a new laptop, a professional camera, a trip to Miami for a networking opportunity. I was the designated ATM, the provider of funds that were accepted as a given, never a gift. This pattern of sacrifice wasn't new. It was a wound that had been festering since we were children. It was a deep, foundational injustice that had shaped my entire life. I remember when I was 16, I won a small, local design competition for a dress I made for my prom. The prize was only $100 and a ribbon, but to me, it was everything. I ran home, clutching the blue ribbon, my heart soaring. I found my parents in the living room, fawning over Jenna's yearbook. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, barely glancing at my ribbon before turning back to Jenna. "But look at this. Jenna was voted most photogenic. That's something you can actually use in life." My father nodded in agreement, ruffling Jenna's hair. My small victory, the first real validation of my talent, was dismissed in an instant. It was a footnote in the grand story of Jenna's effortless charm. The financial dynamic was cemented a few years ago. My dad needed to see a specialist for his back, an expensive doctor not covered by his insurance. I didn't hesitate. I drained my savings account, the money I had been carefully setting aside for design school, and gave it to him. It was nearly $5,000. "This is for the doctor," I told him, pressing the envelope into his hand. "And here's some extra for your regular bills so you don't have to worry." He took it with a solemn nod, thanking me for being such a good daughter. 2 weeks later, my aunt posted photos on Facebook of my parents and Jenna on a spontaneous weekend trip to a wine resort in Michigan. My mom was wearing a new coat, and Jenna was posing with a new designer handbag. When I cautiously asked about it, my mother waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that was just a little something to lift your father's spirits. He's been so down. And Jenna deserved a treat after all the stress." The specialist appointment, they told me, had been rescheduled. I never asked if it was rescheduled again. I knew the answer, and I knew it would hurt too much to hear it confirmed. I existed in their minds as a utility, a resource. My dreams were deferrable, my feelings secondary. They loved me in the way one loves a sturdy, reliable appliance. You don't think about it much until you need it, and you fully expect it to work when you press the button. I kept designing in secret, hoarding my passion like a precious secret because I knew, instinctively, that if I shared it with them, they would find a way to diminish it, to make it seem frivolous and silly compared to Jenna's latest follower count. This competition, the American fashion vanguard, felt different. It was my one, desperate shot at breaking free from the beige, practical box they had put me in. I told myself that if I could just make it, everything would change. I had no idea how right I was, or what that change would cost me. I thought the battle was about proving my talent, but I was about to find out the real fight was for my own soul. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in early September, a splash of vibrant color in the gray sea of my work inbox. It was a mass mailing from a fashion guild I subscribed to, but the subject line made my heart stop. "Submissions now open. The American Fashion Vanguard Competition." My fingers trembled as I clicked the link. This wasn't just any competition. This was the one. It was the industry's most respected platform for undiscovered talent, the one that had launched the careers of designers I had idolized for years. The grand prize was a staggering $250,000 to start your own fashion line, plus a one-year mentorship with legendary designer Julian Croft. Reading the words, I felt a dizzying mix of terror and exhilaration. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around me. Part of me screamed to step back, to retreat to the safety of my predictable life. This was for real designers, people who went to prestigious schools in New York and Paris, not for a dry cleaner seamstress from Chicago who taught herself to drape fabric on a mannequin she'd found on the curb. But another part of me, a voice I had been silencing for years, whispered, "What if?" This was the catalyst. This was the storm. For years I had been treading water, keeping my head just above the surface of my family's needs. But this prize wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was a chance to build a life on my own terms. A life where my talent wasn't a secret but a foundation. The submission deadline was December 1st. I would have to create a single, original piece that represented my entire design philosophy. It was an impossible task, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope that was stronger than my fear. I decided to keep it a complete secret. This dream was fragile, and I knew my family's casual cynicism could shatter it before it even had a chance to grow. I started living a double life. By day, I was Clara, the reliable seamstress. But by night, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer determination, I transformed. My tiny apartment became a sanctuary, a laboratory of creativity. I sketched hundreds of designs, searching for the one that felt true. I wanted to create something that reflected my own story, a piece that appeared simple and understated from a distance, but upon closer inspection, revealed intricate details, hidden strengths, and a complex, resilient structure. The design that finally emerged was a dress. It was a long-sleeved, high-necked column gown in a shade of beige that was almost luminous, like the inside of a seashell. It wasn't a loud color, but it had depth. The magic was in the construction. I used a technique called shadow pleating, where hundreds of tiny hand-stitched pleats were hidden within the seams, creating a subtle texture that moved with the body. The cuffs were embroidered with delicate, self-colored thread in a pattern inspired by the cracks in a sidewalk, something beautiful growing in an unexpected place. It was the most ambitious thing I had ever made. It was me, in the form of a dress. As the weeks went by, my secret project became my obsession. I poured every spare dollar into the finest silk wool blend I could find. I skipped lunches to save money. I declined the few social invitations I received, using work as an excuse. The exhaustion was immense, a heavy cloak I wore all day. But it was matched by a current of excitement that kept me going. My family, of course, noticed the change in my routine, but they interpreted it through their own self-centered lens. "You look tired, Clara," my mother would say over the phone, her voice dripping with faux concern. "You're working too hard at that dead-end job. You should ask for a raise so you can help Jenna out a bit more with her new camera equipment." They never once asked what I was working on, what I was passionate about. They just saw my fatigue as a potential disruption to their income stream. One evening in November, just as I was finishing the final embroidery on the cuffs, Jenna called in a panic. Her laptop had died, the one she used for editing her content. It was a crisis of epic proportions. "I have a brand deal deadline, Clara. I'll lose the whole contract," she wailed. "I need a new one, the best one, and I'm completely broke." I knew what was coming. I had just gotten paid, and I had a little over $1,000 in my account money I needed for the professional photos and shipping required to submit my dress to the competition. "I'm sorry, Jen. I'm really tight this month," I said, my stomach twisting into a knot. The phone was immediately passed to my mother. "Clara, this is your sister's career," she said, her voice cold and disappointed. "After all we've done for you, you can't help her out with this one little thing? What could you possibly need money for that's more important than your family?" The familiar guilt washed over me, a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. I looked at my beautiful, nearly finished dress draped over the mannequin. This was more important. For the first time, I held my ground. "I can't. I'm sorry," I whispered, and hung up the phone before they could argue further. The silence that followed was deafening. I knew I had just drawn a line in the sand, and I had a sinking feeling that they would make me pay for it. The storm was no longer on the horizon. It was about to break right over my head. After the phone call about Jenna's laptop, the temperature in our family dynamic dropped from cool to Arctic. My refusal to pay wasn't seen as me setting a boundary. It was seen as a betrayal. The subsequent weeks leading up to Christmas became a masterclass in passive aggression and emotional manipulation, a series of escalating incidents designed to remind me of my place. The lashing out started small. My mother began forgetting to include me in family group texts about holiday plans. When I'd call to ask for details, she'd feign surprise. "Oh goodness, I thought you were on there. Your father must have updated the group and left you out by mistake." My father, of course, would deny touching the group chat. It was a simple, petty way to exclude me, to make me feel like an outsider who had to fight for a place at the table. The first major incident happened about a week later. Jenna, having somehow secured her new laptop through a generous gift from a follower, which I suspected was my parents' credit card, decided she needed to do a holiday-themed photo shoot. She called me, her voice syrupy sweet. "Clara, I need a huge favor. I need a really luxurious, neutral-toned backdrop for a shoot. I was in your apartment the other day when you were at work, Mom. Let me in to grab a book, and I saw that gorgeous roll of wool silk fabric you have. Can I borrow it? I'll be super careful." My blood ran cold. She was talking about the leftover material from my competition dress, a fabric that had cost me over $300 a yard. "No, Jenna, that fabric is for a project. It's not a backdrop," I said firmly. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "It's just sitting there. I'll only need it for an hour." The next day, I came home from work to find the fabric gone. A note was left on my cutting table. "Borrowed this. You're a lifesaver. Jay." I called her, my voice shaking with fury. She was flippant. "Relax. It's fine. I'm already done with it." When she returned it that evening, it was crumpled in a plastic bag. There was a large, dark stain in the middle that looked suspiciously like coffee, and a small tear near the edge. "It was an accident," she said with a shrug, not even making eye contact as she scrolled through her phone. You can probably get the stain out, right? You're good at that stuff. When I told my parents what happened, my mother defended her. Jenna is under a lot of pressure, Clara. Her career is finally taking off. You have to be more supportive. It's just a piece of cloth. Your sister's future is more important. My father added, That's what happens when you leave expensive things lying around. You should have put it away, if it was so precious. They had twisted the narrative until I was the one at fault for owning something beautiful, for not anticipating my sister's carelessness, for not being supportive enough of her entitlement. The second incident was more direct. I received a small Christmas bonus from work, $500. It was the first time in years I had a little extra money that wasn't immediately earmarked for someone else's needs. I dreamed of what I could do with it. Finally replace my aging sewing machine, take a weekend course on pattern making, or just keep it as a tiny emergency fund. The dream lasted less than 24 hours. My mother called, her voice laced with panic. Clara, we have a crisis. The roof is leaking in the living room, right over the new television. Your father is so stressed. We just don't have the money for a roofer right before the holidays. I felt that familiar sinking feeling. I knew this song. I had heard it before about the faulty plumbing, the broken furnace, the car that needed new brakes, crises that always seemed to coincide with me having a little extra cash. I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. Have you gotten a quote? I asked, trying to sound practical. The roofer said it could be thousands, she cried. We don't need you to cover all of it, of course. But if you could just help us with the deposit, that bonus you mentioned would be a godsend. I hesitated, the image of a new sewing machine flashing in my mind. Clara, please, she whispered. Don't make us beg. We're your parents. The guilt was a physical weight. I caved. I transferred the entire $500, and in return, I received a brief text. T-Tex, you're a lifesaver. The roof, miraculously, was never mentioned again. When I visited a week later, there was no sign of water damage anywhere in the living room. My one attempt at open communication was a disaster. I found my father alone one afternoon, watching a football game. I took a deep breath and sat down beside him. Dad, can we talk? I've been feeling really overwhelmed lately. I feel like a lot is expected of me, financially, and I'm struggling to keep up while also trying to save for my own future. I hoped for a moment of connection, a glimmer of understanding. He didn't even look away from the screen. He just grunted. That's life, Clara. We all have to make sacrifices. Your sacrifice is just a little bigger because your sister is trying to build something and I'm disabled. It's your duty to help. Stop being so ungrateful. Ungrateful. The word hit me like a slap. Ungrateful for the privilege of funding their lives while my own was put on hold indefinitely. I got up and walked out without another word. There was no point. They were speaking a different language, one where my needs would never be translated. The confirmation that I wasn't crazy came from an unexpected source. Maria, my coworker, was a warm, no-nonsense woman in her late 60s who had seen it all. She had become a quiet confidant at work. One day, during our lunch break, she found me staring into space, my sandwich untouched. I was exhausted, having stayed up until 3 a.m. to redo a seam on my dress that wasn't perfect. You have that look again, she said gently. The one that says you're carrying the weight of the world. On impulse, I told her everything. The money, the ruined fabric, my parents' dismissiveness, my secret competition. I even showed her a picture of the dress on my phone. She looked at the photo for a long time, zooming in on the details. Then she looked at me, her eyes sharp and clear. Honey, she said, her voice firm but kind. That dress is a work of art. That talent you have is a gift. Do not let people who are blind to its value dim your light. She reached across the table and patted my hand. And let me tell you something else. They are not just taking your money. They are stealing your future. Every dollar you give them is a brick they take from the foundation of your own life. It's not support. It's sabotage. Hearing it from someone else, someone with no stake in the game, was like a key turning in a lock. The vague sense of unease I'd been living with for years suddenly had a name. Sabotage. I wasn't being oversensitive. I was being systematically dismantled. I knew then that the competition wasn't just about winning. It was about escaping. I just didn't realize how brutal the final moments before my escape would be. Christmas Eve arrived with a biting Chicago wind and a heavy sense of dread in my stomach. The annual family dinner was being held at my parents' house. It was always a performance, a carefully staged play where everyone knew their roles. My mother would be the harried but heroic hostess, my father the jovial patriarch holding court from his armchair, and Jenna the sparkling centerpiece. My role was to be the quiet, helpful stagehand setting the table, clearing the dishes, and providing an appreciative, non-threatening audience. This year, however, I had decided to make a small, silent protest. I was going to wear the dress, my competition piece, my secret declaration of independence. As I got ready in my small apartment, I felt a flutter of nervous pride. The dress felt incredible to wear. The weight of the silk-wool blend was substantial, comforting. The hidden pleats moved with a life of their own, creating a subtle, elegant flow. It was the best thing I had ever made, a physical manifestation of all my secret hopes. I knew they wouldn't understand it. I knew they wouldn't appreciate the technical skill involved. But I hoped, foolishly, that they might at least see that I had tried to look nice, that I had put in an effort. I walked into their house, and the assault began almost immediately. I had barely taken off my coat. Jenna, who was wearing a glittering fire-engine red dress that was probably worth more than my monthly rent, looked me up and down with a pitying smirk. "Oh, Clara," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Is that what you're wearing? It's very beige." My mother rushed over, adjusting a non-existent stray hair on my head. "Honey, it's Christmas Eve. That looks like something you'd wear to an office meeting. You have to try a little harder if you ever want to find a man. No one is attracted to efficiency." Each word was a carefully aimed dart. They weren't just critiquing a dress. They were critiquing me, my personality, my life choices, my very essence. The final blow came from my father. He was sitting in his usual throne-like recliner, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He squinted at me from across the room. "Is that homemade?" he asked. I nodded, a knot forming in my throat. He let out a short, barking laugh. "I can tell. It looks like a sad beige sack, Clara. A sad beige zuck." The phrase hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A few of my aunts and uncles chuckled uncomfortably. No one defended me. The room fell into a brief, awkward silence before Jenna expertly changed the subject to her recent collaboration with a major tea company. The moment passed for everyone but me. For me, the moment froze. I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling the weight of their judgment, their casual cruelty. The dress, which had felt like a suit of armor moments before, now felt like a costume for a fool. All the love, the hope, the thousands of hours I had poured into it were reduced to a punchline. I went through the motions of dinner in a daze. I passed the mashed potatoes. I complimented my mother's gravy. I smiled and nodded as Jenna regaled the table with stories of her influencer life. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I was replaying that moment, the sound of my father's laugh, the look of smug satisfaction on my sister's face. It wasn't just about the dress. It was never just about the dress. It was a summary of our entire relationship. They had looked at the best of me, my talent, my heart, my soul, and they had laughed at it. It was in that moment, as I stared at my reflection in the dark dining room window, that I finally understood. It was a breaking point, a clean, sharp fracture in my soul. I realized that I had spent my entire life trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I had been pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, hoping that if I just poured faster, it would eventually fill up. But it never would. They didn't see me. They didn't want to see me. They needed me to be the sad beige sack, because my competence made their inadequacies feel less glaring. I excused myself from the table, mumbling something about a headache. I locked myself in the guest bathroom and leaned against the cool tile wall, taking deep, shuddering breaths. The anger came first, a hot, cleansing fire. How dare they? How dare they treat me this way after everything I had done, everything I had given up? But beneath the anger was a profound, heartbreaking sadness. The little girl inside me, who had just wanted her parents to be proud of her, was finally accepting that they never would be. That fantasy, which had driven me for so long, died in that bathroom. And with its death came a strange, quiet clarity. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their validation. The only thing I needed was to get out. I just had no idea my escape would be broadcast to the entire nation before the night was over. As I stood in that cold, sterile bathroom, the echoes of their laughter still ringing in my ears, my phone buzzed in my clutch. I almost ignored it, wanting nothing more than to curl up and disappear. But a persistent instinct made me pull it out. The screen lit up with an email notification, the subject line simple and direct. An update from the American Fashion Vanguard Committee. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The rejection email. After the humiliation of the evening, it felt like the universe was delivering one final, cruel joke. With a sense of grim finality, I opened it, bracing myself for the polite, formulaic words of disappointment. But the words on the screen were not what I expected. Dear Miss Vance, on behalf of the selection committee, it is our extraordinary pleasure to inform you that your submission has been chosen. You are one of 3 finalists for the 2025 American Fashion Vanguard Award. A live television announcement of the finalists will be broadcast tonight during the Christmas at the Plaza holiday special at 9 p.m. Central Time. Congratulations, and we look forward to seeing you in New York. I read the email once, twice, a third time. The words swam before my eyes, refusing to make sense. A finalist. Me. They had chosen my dress. The sad beige sack was a finalist for the most important award in American fashion. A giddy, hysterical laugh escaped my lips, half sob, half cheer. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle the sound. They were all out there in the living room, watching some vapid Christmas movie, completely oblivious. They had no idea that in less than 2 hours, their world and my place in it was about to be irrevocably altered. And in that moment of dizzying triumph, another memory surfaced, sharp and clear. It was my Voor Hy Be Mert, my real one. It wasn't just the award. It was something much more concrete. A few weeks prior, I had been on the phone with my father, discussing, or rather, being lectured about an upcoming bill. I had put the phone in my coat pocket when I got to work, forgetting to end the call. My phone had an auto-record feature for calls that I had set up long ago for client consultations and then forgotten about. The call had recorded for nearly 45 minutes. Later that evening, when clearing out my phone's storage, I found the file. I listened out of curiosity. After a few minutes of me not responding, my father must have thought I'd hung up. I heard him dialing another number. His friend, Dave. Hey, is she gone? Dave asked. Yeah, I think so, my father replied, his voice shifting from the weary, pained tone he used with me to one that was light and jovial. Man, I don't know how much longer I can milk this back injury. It's a full-time job acting like you're in pain all the time. He let out a loud laugh. Thank God for Clara. She's so damn gullible. She'll fund my whole retirement without ever asking a single question. It's perfect. At the time, hearing his words had felt like a physical blow, a confirmation of a betrayal I had suspected but never wanted to face. His injury wasn't a tragedy. It was a retirement plan. I wasn't his daughter. I was his gullible pension fund. I had saved the recording, tucked away in a secure folder on my cloud drive, not knowing what I would do with it. It was too painful, too destructive to confront him with. But now, it wasn't just a recording of a lie. It was leverage. And there was more. My grandmother, my mother's mother, and the only person who had ever truly seen my talent had been a seamstress herself. When she passed away 2 years ago, she had left me her old singer and a small, sealed envelope. My mother had dismissed it. She didn't have much, Clara. Probably just some sentimental nonsense. But the envelope contained a letter and a savings bond for $10,000. The letter was my true inheritance. My dearest Clara, it read. I see the fire in you, the same one I had. Your family, they are good people, but they are blind to your light. They will try to use your good heart. Do not let them. This money is for you, not for them. Use it to build your own dream, the one you hide in your sketchbook. It is your time. Don't you dare waste it on people who think you are ordinary. I had cashed the bond and kept the money hidden in a separate bank account, my escape fund. They knew nothing about it. Standing in that bathroom, my phone in one hand, the memories of the recording and my grandmother's letter swirling in my head, a plan began to form. It was cold and clear and utterly terrifying. I wasn't going to say a word. I would walk back out into that living room, endure the rest of the evening, and let them see the announcement on television. I would let them expose themselves. When their mockery turned to greedy celebration, when they started planning how to spend my money, I would be ready. I would have my grandmother's words as my shield and my father's own voice as my sword. I quickly composed a text message to Maria. "Something big is happening tonight. Can I call you later? I might need a place to stay." Her reply was instantaneous. "My door is always open. You call me anytime. Go get 'em, kid." I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was no longer the sad, beige girl they thought they knew. Her eyes were bright with a dangerous, unfamiliar fire. The game had changed. They just didn't know it yet. I walked back into the living room with a newfound composure that seemed to unnerve my family. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and cinnamon, but for me, it smelled of impending battle. I took a seat on the armchair farthest from the main sofa, a silent repositioning of myself on the family chessboard. For the next hour, I was a ghost at my own family Christmas. I watched them, really watched them, for the first time without the filter of hope or obligation. I saw the casual entitlement in the way Jenna flicked through channels, dismissing every show as boring. I saw the performative weariness in my father as he asked my mother to refill his drink, groaning theatrically as he shifted in his chair. I saw my mother's anxious energy, constantly fluffing pillows and rearranging coasters, her happiness contingent on the comfort of everyone but me. They were a closed circuit, a self-sustaining ecosystem of dysfunction, and I was an external power source they had taken for granted for far too long. At 9:05, I spoke up, my voice startlingly calm. "Hey, can we turn to Channel 5? There's a holiday special from the Plaza Hotel I wanted to see." Jenna rolled her eyes. "Seriously? That stuff is so cheesy." But my mother, perhaps sensing my strange mood and wanting to avoid another scene, agreed. "Oh, let her watch her show, Jenna. It's Christmas." She found the channel just as the broadcast was beginning, a dazzling display of lights, celebrity performances, and festive cheer. My family settled in, their attention quickly absorbed by the spectacle on screen. My own attention was focused inward. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. This was it. There was no turning back. The host, a woman with a famous smile and a sequined dress, wrapped up a segment with a pop singer. "And when we come back," she said, her voice bright and professional, "we have a very special announcement. We'll be revealing the 3 incredible finalists for this year's American Fashion Vanguard Award, the future of American style. Stay with us." My father grunted. "Fashion? What a load of nonsense. Bunch of weirdos making ugly clothes for rich people." Jenna nodded. "Seriously, it's not even a real job." The commercial break felt like an eternity. I could feel my palms sweating. Then, the show was back. The host stood beside a large screen, her smile even wider than before. "Every year," she began, "the American Fashion Vanguard Award seeks to find a singular, new voice in design. This year, the submissions were exceptional, but 3 designers stood out for their vision, their craftsmanship, and their unique point of view." The screen behind her lit up with the competition's logo. "Our first finalist is..." A slickly produced video package began to play, showcasing the work of a young man from Brooklyn who made avant-garde menswear. My family watched with mild disinterest. "Our second finalist," the host continued, "is a duo from Los Angeles known for their sustainable, zero-waste designs." Another video played. Jenna snorted. "Sustainable probably just means it's made out of recycled garbage." Then the host's voice dropped slightly, taking on a more serious, reverent tone. "Our third and final nominee is a true discovery. a designer whose work captivated the entire committee with its quiet power and breathtaking technical skill. Her submission, a deceptively simple gown, was described by Judge Julian Croft as a masterclass in understated elegance and a love letter to the art of construction. My breath caught in my throat. The screen behind the host changed. It was a close-up shot of my dress, the camera slowly panning over the shadow pleating, the delicate embroidery on the cuff. Then, it cut to my submission photo, a simple, elegant headshot. From Chicago, Illinois, the host's voice boomed. Our final nominee is Clara Vance. The camera in the studio cut back to the host as the screen beside her now showed a full-length video of a model walking in my dress. And then, the prize money was mentioned. These 3 finalists will compete for the grand prize of $250,000 to launch their own fashion label. Silence. It was a profound, absolute silence that swallowed all the air in the room. My father's jaw was literally hanging open. My mother's hand was frozen halfway to her mouth, a Christmas cookie forgotten. Jenna's face was a mask of disbelief, her perfectly made-up eyes wide with shock. They all slowly turned their heads to look at me, their expressions identical. It was the look of people whose entire understanding of the universe had just been shattered. My father was the first to break the silence. He let out a choked, incredulous sound. That was you?" I simply nodded, my gaze steady. My mother found her voice next. It was a high-pitched, reedy sound. "Clara, you're a fashion designer?" And then, the pivot. It was instantaneous and shameless. Jenna leaped up from the couch. "Oh my God, Clara! That's amazing! I knew it! I always told you that dress was special!" she squealed, rushing over to hug me. The same dress she had called mousy 2 hours ago. My mother was next, her eyes suddenly filled with tears of pride. "My talented girl! You kept this all a secret. We always believed in you, you know. We just wanted you to be practical." My father stood up, his limp miraculously gone, and clapped me on the shoulder. $250,000! Vance, that's my girl. I knew you had it in you. They swarmed me, their praise a suffocating wave of hypocrisy. And then, just as quickly, they started spending my money. "We can finally move out of this old house," my father declared. "Find a place with a proper backyard. And Jenna can finally get the funding she needs to take her brand to the next level," my mother added, beaming at her golden child. "This is the answer to all our prayers." I let them talk, a torrent of greedy, self-serving plans pouring out of them. I let them build their castles in the air, built on the foundation of my talent, my work, my future. When they finally paused for breath, looking at me expectantly, I spoke. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. "No." They all stared at me. "What do you mean, no?" my father asked, his jovial mask slipping. "No," I repeated, standing up. "You will not be getting a new house. Jenna will not be getting funding for her brand. You will not be getting a single cent of that money if I win it." I looked at each of them in turn. "Jenna, 2 hours ago, you called this dress mousy. Mom, you said I needed to try harder. And Dad," I looked him straight in the eye, "you called my work, the best of me, a sad beige sack. You didn't believe in me. You ridiculed me. The only thing that has changed in the last 3 hours is the introduction of a dollar sign. Your support is conditional, and the conditions are no longer being met." "Now that's not fair," my father blustered, his face turning red. "We've had to make sacrifices for this family. My injury—" "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare talk to me about your injury." I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady. "I think your friend Dave would be interested to know you're discussing your private conversations." I pressed play on the recording. My father's voice filled the silent room, clear and unmistakable. "Man, I don't know how much longer I can milk this back injury. Thank God for Clara. She's so damn gullible. She'll fund my whole retirement." I only played 10 seconds of it. It was enough. The color drained from my father's face. My mother looked at him in horror. Jenna just stared, speechless. "The Bank of Clara is closed," I announced, my voice ringing with a finality that was absolute. "Permanently. I'm using my grandmother's inheritance. and any money I win from this competition to start my own life. A life you are no longer welcome to be a part of. I walked to the hall closet, grabbed my coat, and for the last time, I walked out their front door. The cold December air hit me like a physical slap, shocking me back into my own body, into the present moment. I walked down the snow-dusted sidewalk, my heels clicking a steady, determined rhythm on the frozen pavement. I did not look back. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing my retreat. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if I were physically shedding years of accumulated weight, the weight of their expectations, their casual dismissals, their suffocating need. It was a burden I had carried for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight, to breathe all the way into the bottom of my lungs. The weight was finally gone, and the emptiness it left behind wasn't hollow. It was expansive. My car, parked a block away under the forgiving glow of a streetlight, felt like a getaway vehicle, a portal to another life. As I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar scent of old paper from my sketchbooks and the faint aroma of wool fabric greeted me like old friends. I turned the key, and the engine hummed to life, a quiet, reassuring sound in the stillness of the night. For a long moment, I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, and I finally let myself breathe. I didn't cry. Instead, a deep, bone-deep sense of peace settled over me, a tranquility so profound it felt almost alien. It was the profound quiet that comes after a long and violent storm, when the wind dies down and you can finally hear your own heartbeat again. I drove straight to Maria's house, navigating the familiar streets with a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie of my own life. She opened the door before I even had a chance to knock, a warm flannel robe tied at her waist, and a knowing, gentle smile on her face. Her home was a haven of warmth and light, a stark contrast to the cold formality I had just escaped. She didn't press me for details, didn't ask a single probing question. She just wrapped me in a hug that smelled of chamomile tea and wood smoke and said, "The guest room is all ready for you. Let's get you settled." It was in the safety of her embrace that the first tears finally came. They weren't tears of sadness or anger, but hot, cleansing tears of pure relief and utter exhaustion. I had done it. The cord was cut. I was free. The next few days were a blur of logistics and liberation. My phone, as expected, became an inferno of notifications. My parents and Jenna, deprived of their direct line of control, cycled through a predictable and desperate pattern of texts and voicemails. First came the white-hot rage. Texts filled with exclamation points and capital letters, accusing me of being cruel, ungrateful, and mentally unstable. Then, the tone shifted to manipulative guilt-tripping. My mother left long, rambling voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart, how my father's health was suddenly fragile again, how I was breaking her heart. Finally, when anger and guilt failed, came the desperate, syrupy sweet pleas for me to be reasonable, to come home so we can talk things through as a family. I listened to the first few, my stomach churning, before realizing I didn't have to. With a strange sense of ceremony, I opened my contacts list and, one by one, I blocked their numbers. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. With Maria's practical guidance, I started to build the scaffolding for my new life. I called the lawyer my grandmother had used, a kind, elderly man named Mr. Abernathy, whose voice was as comforting as old leather. I explained the situation, and he was not surprised in the least. "Your grandmother was a very wise woman, Clara," he said, a warm chuckle in his voice. "She told me once, 'My Clara has a spine of steel. She just doesn't know it yet. But when she finds it, Lord help anyone standing in her way.'" His words were a balm to my bruised soul. He helped me draft and send a formal cease and desist letter, making it legally clear that any further attempts at contact would be considered harassment. He also walked me through the process of officially setting up a sole proprietorship for my future business, turning Vance Designs from a dream into a legal entity. The most freeing act of all was retrieving my things. I knew I couldn't face it alone. I hired a small two-man moving company for an hour, and Maria insisted her burly, kind-hearted son-in-law, a man named Mike who looked like he could bench press a car, come along as a peaceful deterrent. I went back to my old apartment for the last time. As I stood in the doorway, I was struck by how small and temporary it all felt. I packed my life into boxes, my sketches, my fabrics, my treasured books, and most importantly, my grandmother's Singer sewing machine. I left behind almost everything else. The furniture I had bought to fit, the cramped space, the dishes, the linens. I took only what was truly mine, what was essential to my soul and my future. I didn't go to my parents' house. There was nothing there for me but ghosts. My new beginning started in a small, sun-drenched industrial loft space in the Pilsen neighborhood, an area known for its vibrant arts community. I used my grandmother's inheritance to pay for the first 6 months of rent, a strategic investment in my own sanity. It wasn't technically a residential space, but it had a small kitchenette and a bathroom, and the landlord, an artist himself, was happy to rent to another creative. The space was vast and empty, with high ceilings and huge windows that flooded the room with light. The air smelled of old wood, turpentine, and possibility. It was my studio, my sanctuary, and my home. The first night, I slept on an air mattress on the floor, surrounded by boxes, the city lights twinkling outside my massive windows. I wasn't lonely. I felt wholly, completely myself for the first time. I poured all my energy into preparing for the final round of the competition in New York. The challenge was to create a 3-piece collection that expanded on the vision of my initial submission. Waking up every morning without the heavy dread of a family crisis or a financial demand was a revelation. The creative energy that had been systematically suppressed for so long erupted from me. Ideas flowed. I worked with a joy and a freedom I had never known, sketching, draping, and sewing from sunrise until long after midnight, fueled by coffee and the sheer, exhilarating thrill of creation. News from my old life trickled in through my aunt, the only family member I hadn't cut ties with. She called, ostensibly to congratulate me, but also to deliver a status report. My parents were in a full-blown panic. Without my monthly contribution, the precarious financial house of cards they had built was collapsing. My father, stripped of his debilitating injury excuse, was now being forced to look for work for the first time in 5 years. Jenna's influencer career had stalled dramatically without my funding for her props, outfits, and trips. Their carefully curated world was unraveling. The news didn't bring me the vindictive pleasure I might have once expected. Instead, it just felt distant. Their chaos was no longer my storm to weather. My victory wasn't their downfall. My victory was the peace I felt in the quiet hum of my sewing machine and the brilliant, limitless future taking shape under my own 2 hands. A year later, I stood in the middle of my own bustling design studio, the familiar, comforting sound of sewing machines humming a symphony of productivity around me. The industrial loft, once a vast, empty space echoing with potential, had been completely transformed. One side was my personal living area, a cozy, art-filled haven with a plush sofa and shelves overflowing with books on art and design. The other, larger side was the vibrant, organized headquarters of Vance, my eponymous clothing label. Life was not just different. It was a universe away from the bleak, circumscribed existence I had known before that fateful Christmas. I didn't win the grand prize at the American Fashion Vanguard competition. I was the first runner-up. In the moment the winner was announced, a fleeting, familiar sting of disappointment hit me, the old voice, whispering that I was second best. But it vanished as quickly as it came. The exposure I received was a prize far more valuable than the cash. Julian Croft, the legendary designer and head judge, had taken a special interest in my work. After the ceremony, he sought me out, his sharp eyes appraising me. "Money is easy to spend," he'd said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "Taste and talent are not so easily acquired. You have both. Don't waste it." Though he wasn't my official mentor, he took me under his wing, making a few strategic phone calls that opened doors I didn't even know existed. He connected me with fabric suppliers in Italy, a small, ethical manufacturer in New York, and, most importantly, the head buyer for a major luxury online retailer. His public endorsement he called my final collection the most exciting and emotionally resonant debut he'd seen in a decade, was a seal of approval that money couldn't buy. Using the runner-up prize money and the last of my grandmother's inheritance, I launched my online boutique. My brand was built on the philosophy of my first dress: quiet power, impeccable construction, and timeless elegance for women who didn't need to shout to be heard. I found a niche of customers who were tired of fast fashion, women who wanted clothes that were an investment, clothes with a story. The response was slow at first, then steady, then overwhelming. My designs were featured in a prominent fashion blog, then a major magazine. The tipping point came when a famously elegant A-list actress wore one of my coats to a movie premiere. My website crashed that night from the traffic. Within 6 months, I had to hire my first 2 employees, both talented young women I met through the competition. By the 1-year mark, Vance was a profitable, growing business, and I was in talks with that luxury retailer about an exclusive collection. I was no longer just a seamstress. I was a founder and a CEO. I was living a dream I had barely allowed myself to whisper in the darkest hours of the night. My life was also filled with a new kind of family, a chosen one, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared passion. Maria had become a permanent fixture, my unofficial business advisor, official surrogate mother, and the only person allowed to tell me when I was working too hard. The other finalists from the competition had become my closest friends. We had a group chat that was a constant stream of encouragement, industry, gossip, and creative support. We celebrated each other's successes with genuine joy and supported each other through failures without judgment. There was no jealousy, no hidden agendas, only the pure, uncomplicated bond of people who understood the sacrifices our art required. As for my biological family, their lives had also changed dramatically, though not in the way they had planned. My aunt kept me updated in small, reluctant doses. They had been forced to sell the house, the stage for so much of their performance of upper-middle-class life. After paying off the staggering amount of credit card debt they had accumulated, there wasn't much left. They downsized to a small, 2-bedroom rental apartment in a town an hour outside the city. The reality of their financial situation, no longer cushioned by my income, had been a brutal awakening. My father had found a job as a manager at a local hardware store. According to my aunt, he complained constantly about his idiot coworkers and aching back, but he went to work every day. The chronic, debilitating injury had miraculously downgraded to a manageable ache when faced with the alternative of actual poverty. My mother, for the first time in her adult life, also had to find work. She took a job as a receptionist at a dental office, a position that required her to be polite and helpful to strangers, a skill set she found deeply challenging. The most significant change was in Jenna. Her influencer career had completely imploded. Without the constant funding for a glamorous, aspirational lifestyle, her content became mundane, and her followers, sensing the inauthenticity, dwindled. She now worked in the cosmetics department of a large department store, a job where she had to compliment other women all day, a bitter pill for someone who had only ever wanted to be the one receiving the praise. They reached out a few times over the year, their tone shifting with their circumstances. The initial angry voicemails gave way to awkward, tentative emails. My mother sent me a long, rambling message around my birthday, a masterwork of passive aggression and self-pity. But buried within it were 3 words I never thought I'd read from her. "I am sorry." It was followed by a list of justifications, but the words were there. My father sent a simple, 1-line email a few weeks later. "I was wrong. I'm proud of you." Curiosity and a lingering, foolish thread of hope made me agree to meet them for coffee in a neutral location. It was one of the most strained and uncomfortable hours of my life. They looked older, smaller, worn down by a reality they had never prepared for. They apologized again, this time to my face, but their apologies were still flawed, tinged with a bewilderment that they had ended up in this position. They couldn't quite grasp that their hardship was a direct and unavoidable consequence of their own choices. I looked at them across the small cafe table and felt not anger, but a profound and final sense of pity. I accepted their apology, not for them, but for me. It was the final brick in the wall I was building around my new life. I established the new boundaries, firm and clear. Our relationship from now on will be one of low contact, I explained, my voice steady. I will send a card on holidays and birthdays. I will be civil if we see each other, but I will not be your financial safety net, your therapist, or your emotional dumping ground. My energy is now reserved for my business and for the people who have earned a place in my life. They were not happy with these terms, but they had no choice but to accept them. They had lost all their power, all their leverage. The power dynamic had been permanently, fundamentally rewired. My success was the ultimate, undeniable proof that I had never truly needed them, but they had desperately, parasitically, needed me. And in their relentless efforts to keep me small and beige, they had only succeeded in losing the most valuable asset they ever had. Sitting on the floor of my studio late one night, surrounded by the beautiful chaos of sketches for my new spring collection, I found myself thinking about that Christmas dress. After the competition, the Smithsonian's Costume Institute had reached out. They had acquired it for their permanent collection, as an example of neo-minimalist design and modern craftsmanship. The sad, beige sack was now officially considered a piece of art, preserved behind climate-controlled glass for future generations to admire. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was a constant, beautiful reminder of how far I had come. That dress had become the perfect metaphor for my own journey. My family had only seen the plain, unassuming surface. They never bothered to look closer, to appreciate the strength in the thousands of tiny, invisible stitches, the complexity of the hidden pleats, the heart and soul that went into its creation. They saw what they wanted to see, something ordinary, something they could easily control and dismiss, because its quiet complexity was a threat to their loud, simple world. The greatest, most painful, and most liberating lesson I learned over this past year was not about fashion, but about value. I had spent my entire life on a desperate, soul-crushing quest for validation from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. I had meticulously tailored myself into a shape that was convenient for them, silencing my own voice and dimming my own light to make them feel more comfortable, more powerful in their own stagnancy. I honestly believed their approval was the ultimate prize, the measure of my worth. But I was wrong. The real prize was self-respect. It was the devastating, yet freeing, moment I realized that their opinion of me was never about me at all. It was a projection of their own fears, their own insecurities, and their own limitations. My worth was never up for their debate. It existed in my talent, in my resilience, in my quiet kindness, and in the deep well of determination that finally allowed me to say that one simple, world-altering word, no. That single word was the most powerful design I ever created. It wasn't stitched with thread, but with courage forged in years of quiet disappointment. It restructured the very fabric of my life, allowing me to take the shears to the toxic patterns I had been trapped in. It allowed me to cut away the rotten, decaying parts and tailor a future that fit me perfectly, a future with room to breathe and grow. I learned that true family isn't about blood, obligation, or shared history. It's about who shows up for you when the lights are off and the cameras are gone. It's about who champions you in secret, who sees your sad, beige sack and recognizes it for the masterpiece it is not because a television host told them so, but because they actually took the time to see you. It's the Mariahs and the Mr. Abernathys of the world, the people who offer you a cup of tea and a safe place to land without asking for anything in return. My life now is richer and more vibrant than I ever could have imagined, filled with color and texture and purpose. I am surrounded by love and support that is genuine, unconditional, and freely given. I have built a life and a business on a foundation of authenticity and hard work. And while the scars from my past are still there, they are no longer raw, open wounds. They are intricate patterns, like the subtle embroidery on that first dress, beautiful reminders of the cracks I had to grow through to become the woman I am today. I wouldn't trade them. They are part of my design. Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between your own dream and the role your family expected you to play? What did you do? And what did you learn from that difficult choice? I would be so honored to hear your stories and insights in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and finding your own incredible strength. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that their value is not determined by the nearsighted opinions of others. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the bravest and most beautiful thing you can do is wear your own sad, beige sack with pride, because the only approval you ever truly need is the one that comes from the mirror.